There is something nobody tells you about real change, that they talk about motivation. They talk about discipline. They talk about waking up at 5 in the morning and making bold decisions and transforming your life in 30 days. They sell you systems and schedules and the idea that if you just try harder, push further, want it badly enough, everything will shift. But it never quite works that way. Does it? You have tried. You have started over more times than you can count. You have made promises to yourself in quiet moments, sitting alone at the end of a difficult day, or staring at the ceiling in the early hours of the morning, promises that felt real, that felt urgent, that felt different this time. And then the days passed. The urgency faded, and you found yourself back where you started, a little more tired, a little more skeptical that anything could actually change. Here is what they never told you. The mind does not respond to force. You cannot bully yourself into becoming someone different. You cannot white-knuckle your way into lasting peace, into clarity, into a better version of who you are. Pressure creates resistance, and resistance, over time, quietly defeats even the most determined person. What actually works is almost embarrassingly simple. So simple, in fact, that most people walk right past it every single day without noticing. Your brain changes through repetition, not dramatic repetition, not heroic repetition, quiet, ordinary, almost boring repetition, the kind that happens in the background of a normal life, the kind that does not feel like transformation while it is happening. And then one day, not a day you planned, not a day you were watching for, you realize you have become someone slightly different, someone calmer, someone steadier, someone who responds where you used to react. This is not a program. This is not a challenge. This is an invitation to stop forcing change and to begin allowing it instead. In the next hour, we are going to move through 10 habits. Not 10 dramatic overhauls, 10 small, quiet shifts in how you move through your days. Each one is simple, each one is accessible, and each one, practiced consistently, will begin to rewire the way your brain processes the world around you. You do not need to implement all 10 tonight. You do not need to be perfect. You only need to listen, to recognize yourself somewhere in these words, and to choose one small thing to begin. The brain you will have 6 months from now is being shaped right now, in this moment, by what you choose to pay attention to. So let us begin quietly. Chapter 1. The myth of willpower. There was a man in ancient Rome who understood something about the nature of the self that most modern science is only now beginning to confirm. Marcus Aurelius ruled the most powerful empire the world had ever known. He commanded armies. He settled disputes between nations. He carried the weight of millions of lives in his daily decisions. And yet the writing he left behind, written privately, never intended for anyone else to read, is almost entirely about one thing, not power, not conquest, not ambition, self-governance, in his private journals, which we now know as the Meditations, Marcus Aurelius wrote this: "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He did not say you have power over your circumstances through sheer force of will. He did not say push harder, want more, refuse to give in. He said you have power over your mind, the direction of your attention, the interpretation you place on what happens to you, the thoughts you choose to engage, and the thoughts you choose to let pass. Because Marcus Aurelius understood something that the modern self-help industry has almost completely forgotten. Willpower is not a muscle you can simply build through use. It is a resource. And like all resources, it depletes. Neuroscience now confirms what he understood intuitively. The prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for decisions, impulse control, and rational thought, requires glucose to function. It gets tired. It gets overwhelmed. By the end of a long day filled with decisions and demands and social interactions, it is running on empty. And that is precisely when the habits you have been forcing through willpower collapse. You are not weak. You are not lacking discipline. You have simply been trying to use the wrong tool. The first habit that quietly rewires your brain is this. Stop relying on willpower as your primary strategy for change. This sounds almost like giving up. It is the opposite. When you stop depending on willpower, you begin to design your environment, your routines, and your identity in ways that make the right choices effortless rather than effortful. You make decisions once in a calm, clear moment, and then you arrange your life so that those decisions do not need to be made again every single day. You remove the candy from the kitchen so you do not need willpower to resist it. You put the book on your pillow so you do not need motivation to read it. You set the clothes out the night before so morning is one less decision. These are not tricks. These are the practical application of how the brain actually works. Your brain is a prediction machine. It is constantly looking for patterns, for shortcuts, for ways to do familiar things without spending precious energy on conscious decision-making. When you repeat something in the same context, at the same time, in response to the same cue, your brain begins to automate it. The behavior moves from the effortful prefrontal cortex into the basal ganglia, where habits live, where things happen automatically, below the level of conscious choice. And this is the profound truth underneath the first habit. You do not need more willpower. You need better architecture. Design the environment. Create the cue. Repeat the behavior, and then get out of the way and let the brain do what the brain does best. The transformation you are waiting for is not going to come from trying harder. It is going to come from trying differently. Chapter 2. Morning before the world wakes. Before you check your phone, the most important thing has already been decided, not by you, by the architecture of your neurology. In the first 20 minutes after waking, your brain is in a state that researchers describe as hypnopompic, a threshold state between sleep and full waking consciousness. The prefrontal cortex is slowly coming back online. The default mode network, which is the brain's resting state associated with self-reflection and autobiographical memory, is still dominant. And your brain is unusually receptive to suggestion, to narrative, to the emotional tone that will color everything that follows. This is not mysticism. This is neurochemistry. What you feed your mind in that first window sets the emotional and cognitive tone for the rest of your day. It is not a small thing. It is, in many ways, the most important thing. And most people hand that window directly to someone else. The notification, the news alert, the social media feed, the argument happening somewhere in the world that has nothing to do with your life but somehow enters your nervous system before you have even sat up, before you have breathed deliberately, before you have remembered who you are and what matters to you. The second habit is deceptively simple. Protect the first 20 minutes of your morning as if your mind depends on it. Because it does. This does not mean you need to meditate for an hour or journal 3 pages or perform an elaborate ritual. It means only this. Before you consume anything, any news, any social content, any other person's agenda, you give your mind something of your own choosing. It could be silence. Real silence, sitting with a cup of something warm, looking at the light coming through a window, letting your thoughts settle like sediment in still water. Seneca wrote in one of his letters, "Retire into yourself as much as you can." And he did not mean physically. He meant this: pull back from the noise. Return to yourself before the world arrives, that it could be a few lines of something meaningful, not content designed to provoke or entertain, but something that asks something of you, a philosophical reflection, a single question you carry through the day. What would I like today to mean? What kind of person do I want to encounter in the hours ahead? It could be movement, not punishing exercise, but the quiet return to your body. Walking, stretching, the simple act of being physical before being digital. What matters is not the specific practice. What matters is the intention underneath it. You are not starting your day by reacting. You are starting your day by choosing. And over time, this single shift changes something fundamental in the way you experience your own life. You begin to feel like the author of your days rather than a passenger in them. The world still arrives with its demands and its noise. But you arrive first, and that changes everything. The morning is not just the beginning of the day. It is the beginning of the self you will be for the rest of the day. Choose it deliberately. Chapter 3. The power of what you do not consume there is a question almost nobody asks themselves. And it is one of the most important questions available to a human being living in the 21st century. What am I allowing into my mind today? Not what am I learning? Not what am I achieving? Not what am I producing? Simply this: what is entering my consciousness today? And did I choose it? The Stoics had a concept they called the dichotomy of control. Epictetus, who was born a slave and became one of the most influential philosophers in the ancient world, taught this above everything else. There are things within our control, our judgments, our intentions, our responses, our desires. And there are things outside our control, everything else. The news, other people's behavior, the economy, the weather, the endless churn of events happening across a world too large for any one mind to hold. He taught that the disciplined mind focuses its energy on what is within its power and practices a kind of deliberate indifference to the rest. Not cruelty, not ignorance, indifference. The recognition that what you cannot control does not deserve to live rent-free inside the limited space of your attention. The third habit is this: practice intentional non-consumption. Every day, something will try to enter your mind that you did not invite. This is inevitable. But most people go much further than that. They actively seek out content that disturbs them, outrages them, unsettles them, not because they are drawn to pain, but because the brain is biologically wired toward novelty and threat. The newsfeed exploits this perfectly. Every headline is designed to activate your threat detection system. Every notification is engineered to interrupt you. And the cumulative effect of hours of this kind of consumption is a mind that lives in a low-grade state of anxiety, a mind that feels overwhelmed without knowing exactly why, a mind that finds it difficult to concentrate, to be present, to feel at ease in ordinary moments. Intentional non-consumption is not about being uninformed. It is about being the gatekeeper of your own mind. You choose what enters. You choose when. You choose how much. And increasingly, you choose to let silence into the space where stimulation used to be. There is research from the Max Planck Institute suggesting that even brief periods of silence as little as 2 minutes can promote neurogenesis, the growth of new brain cells, particularly in the hippocampus, which is the region associated with memory and emotional regulation. Silence is not empty. Silence is where the brain recovers, integrates, and rebuilds itself. The habit is not dramatic. It looks like this. Before you open any app, any feed, any source of information, you pause for one moment and ask a single question. Is this something I am choosing or something I am defaulting to? That pause alone begins to change your relationship with your own attention. And attention, as you begin to understand, is not a passive thing. It is the raw material of your life. Whatever you give your attention to consistently, you become. Choose carefully what you allow in. What you keep out is just as important as what you let through. Chapter 4. The art of showing up imperfectly. Somewhere along the way, you learned that if something is worth doing, it is worth doing well. It sounds wise. It sounds like the advice of someone who cared about quality, about effort, about not wasting your potential on half-hearted attempts. And in certain contexts, it is genuinely good guidance. But somewhere in the translation, many people heard something slightly different. If I cannot do it perfectly, there is no point in doing it at all. And that small distortion has cost more dreams, more potential, more quiet possibilities than almost any other belief a person can carry. Neuroscience has a very different understanding of how skill, character, and identity are actually built. It comes down to a process called myelination. When you perform any behavior, any thought pattern, any physical action, any emotional response, the neural pathway associated with that behavior is reinforced by a substance called myelin. Myelin is a fatty sheath that wraps around nerve fibers and increases the speed and efficiency of the signal traveling through them. The more you repeat a behavior, the more myelin builds up, and the faster and more automatic that behavior becomes. Here is what is crucial to understand. Myelin does not care if the performance was perfect. It does not care if you were tired or distracted or only managed half of what you intended. It builds with repetition. Every repetition, including the imperfect ones. The fourth habit is this. Show up, even when you cannot show up fully. Write one paragraph when you plan to write a chapter. Do 10 minutes of the practice when you plan to do 45. Make one healthy choice when the day has already included 17 unhealthy ones. Read 2 pages when you meant to read 20. These small, incomplete, imperfect appearances are not failures. They are deposits into the account of who you are becoming. And they keep the neural pathway warm. They keep the identity alive. They tell the brain that this is something you do, not something you used to do, not something you are trying to do, but something you do. Marcus Aurelius himself understood this in the context of virtue. He did not write about achieving perfect virtue and then maintaining it. He wrote about returning to it daily, after failure, after distraction, after the inevitable drift that comes with being human. When you wake up in the morning, he wrote, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly, but I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and I have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own. He did not begin each morning assuming he had already arrived. He began each morning recommitting to the direction. And that is the habit underneath the habit. Not perfection, not an unbroken streak, just the quiet, unglamorous act of returning, over and over, to what matters to you, to who you are trying to become. The people who change most profoundly are not the ones who never fall short. They are the ones who fall short and show up anyway, who do the small version when the full version is unavailable, who keep the thread alive even when the tapestry looks nothing like they imagined, show up imperfectly, show up incompletely. Just show up, the brain will do the rest. Chapter 5. The nightly architect. Most people think the most important part of the day is the beginning. They are half right. What you do with the last 30 minutes before you sleep shapes the neurological landscape you will wake up into. The brain does not simply turn off when you close your eyes. It enters a state of extraordinary activity, consolidating memories, processing emotional experiences, strengthening or pruning neural connections based on what received your attention during the day. Sleep is not rest in the passive sense. Sleep is reconstruction. And the quality of that reconstruction is directly influenced by what you gave your mind in the final moments before it began. This is why the fifth habit, and one of the most underestimated tools of psychological transformation, is what researchers sometimes call a closing ritual. A deliberate, consistent set of behaviors that signals to your nervous system that the day is complete, that you are safe, that you can release the tension of forward motion and allow the deeper work to begin. It begins with a decision that most modern people find genuinely difficult. The decision to stop. Not to scroll until you fall asleep. Not to have the television running in the background. Not to lie in bed mentally rehearsing the things you did not finish, the conversations that went wrong, the tasks waiting for you tomorrow, but to actually stop, to draw a line around the day and say, this is where today ends. Then comes the part that changes everything. For 3 to 5 minutes, no more, is needed. You review the day not with criticism, but with curiosity. You are not a judge. You are an architect reviewing the blueprints. You ask yourself simple questions. What went well today, even in small ways? Where did I handle something better than I might have a year ago? What is one thing I am grateful for that happened in the last 24 hours? This practice is not positive thinking in the superficial sense. It is neurological training. The brain has a well-documented negativity bias, a tendency to register negative experiences more strongly and retain them longer than positive ones. This was adaptive for our ancestors who needed to remember where the predators were. It is maladaptive in a modern life where the threats are rarely physical and the good things are everywhere, quiet and unannounced, easy to miss. When you deliberately direct your attention to what went well, you are not denying the difficult things. You are rebalancing a bias that, uncorrected, causes the brain to build an increasingly dark and distorted picture of your life. Over time, this 5-minute practice begins to shift the lens through which you see everything. Not because the world changes, because the brain changes. It begins to scan more readily for evidence of progress, for moments of grace, for the small dignities of an ordinary day. And then you sleep, and the brain takes what you gave it and builds with it through the night. Seneca wrote near the end of his life, "I examine my entire day and go back over what I have done and said, hiding nothing from myself, passing nothing by." He did this not in torment, but in the spirit of a thoughtful student reviewing his own practice, without cruelty, without performance. Just honest, quiet attention. The knightly architect does not build with grand gestures. He builds with the last 5 minutes of every day, placed deliberately, one evening at a time. And over months, over years, the structure that rises is extraordinary. You have arrived at the end of this hour. And something has already changed. Not because you heard the perfect idea, not because a single insight arrived and rearranged everything, but because for this stretch of time you chose to be still. You chose to listen. You gave your mind something quiet and considered to settle into. And that in itself is the practice. The 10 habits we have moved through today are not separate things. They are one continuous gesture, the gesture of a person who has decided to stop being at war with their own mind and to begin instead working gently with it. Stop relying on willpower to force what architecture can allow. Protect the first moments of your morning before the world arrives. Choose carefully what you permit to enter your mind each day. Show up imperfectly and trust that the imperfect showing up still counts. Close your days with deliberate attention rather than unconscious drifting. And the others, the habits we touched within each of these chapters, the pause before reacting, the silence you protect, the small physical acts that keep you anchored in your body, the questions you learn to carry rather than the answers you rush to find, the discipline of returning to your values after every departure from them. These are the quiet materials of a rebuilt mind. You will not feel the change tomorrow morning, perhaps not next week. The brain rewires slowly, invisibly, the way a river slowly changes its course through the gentle persistence of water. You do not watch it happen. You wake up one ordinary day and realize the landscape is different. Epictetus, the man who spent years in chains and still arrived at profound freedom, said this: "Seek not the good in external things. Seek it in yourself, the version of you that is calmer, more grounded, more consistently at peace with the ordinary texture of life. That person is not waiting for different circumstances. That person is being constructed right now, in the choices you make today and tomorrow and the day after that. You do not need to transform dramatically. You do not need to arrive anywhere spectacular. You only need to make one small, quiet choice today that the you of 6 months from now will be grateful for. And then make it again tomorrow. That is all. That is everything. Thank you for spending this hour here. Come back whenever the noise gets too loud and you need to remember what quiet sounds like. We will be here.